She was never the loudest name, never the most controversial face. And yet, Victoria Song managed something almost impossible in the Asian entertainment industry. She survived 2 systems that destroy most people who enter them. Born as Song Qian, trained as a classical dancer in Beijing, and rebuilt as Victoria Song inside South Korea's idol machine, her life looks, on paper, like a perfect success story. No public meltdowns, no criminal scandals, no sudden disappearances. Just discipline, consistency, and a reputation so clean it borders on untouchable. But in the world of criminal tracks, the absence of scandal is often the most revealing clue. Because when a person moves through 2 of the most unforgiving entertainment systems on Earth without visible damage, the real question is not what went wrong. It's what had to be sacrificed to make that possible. Victoria was promoted as a symbol of global harmony, the reliable leader, the foreign idol who never complained, the actress who never crossed invisible lines. Over time, her image became so controlled, so carefully maintained, that it stopped looking like protection and started to resemble containment. Not a cage you can see, but one you're never allowed to leave. This is not the story of a woman destroyed by scandal. This is the story of a woman who avoided it at all costs, and the quiet price that followed. Because in industries built on obedience and perception, staying clean often means staying silent, and that raises uncomfortable questions. If every choice you make is safe, is it still your choice? If walking away means losing everything, is staying really loyalty or survival? And if you were placed in her position, caught between stability and freedom, how would you handle it? This is Victoria Song, not the idol you remember, but the system she never escaped. Before she was known as Victoria Song, before stages, contracts, and carefully managed silence, she was simply Song Qian, a student trained to disappear into perfection. Her early life did not point toward celebrity. It pointed toward discipline. Classical Chinese dance at the Beijing Dance Academy is not about applause or individuality. It is about obedience, repetition, and absolute control over the body. Mistakes are not dramatic failures. They are quietly corrected, erased, and never mentioned again. That environment did not make her famous, but it shaped something far more important: the ability to endure without complaint. When SM Entertainment selected her as a trainee, it was not because she fit the standard idol template. She was older than most trainees. She was foreign. Her Korean was limited. But she offered something rare inside the K-pop system: reliability. From the beginning, insiders described her not as rebellious or ambitious, but as someone who absorbed pressure and kept moving. That trait would later be framed as leadership. In reality, it was survival training. Inside SM's trainee system, foreign idols occupied a fragile position. They carried global appeal, but lacked institutional protection. Contracts were opaque. Cultural misunderstandings were routine. Complaints could quietly end a career. In that environment, Victoria learned a rule that would follow her for years: the safest artist is the one who never becomes a problem. She trained longer, she worked harder, she avoided attention that wasn't assigned to her. When F of X debuted, she was placed as leader not because she dominated the spotlight, but because she could hold a group together without drawing power toward herself. She translated, she mediated, she absorbed criticism meant for others. On camera, this was framed as maturity. Off camera, it was function. The group's experimental concept made headlines, but behind the scenes, stability mattered more than creativity. And Victoria became that stabilizer. What is often forgotten is that leadership in idol groups rarely comes with authority. It comes with responsibility, without leverage. When schedules overloaded, when promotions stalled, when internal tensions rose, the leader was expected to keep things quiet. Not to fix the system, but to prevent noise. In that sense, Victoria's role was never about control. It was about containment. From the outside, this period looks like the foundation of success. From inside the system, it was the moment her public identity hardened. She was no longer just an artist. She was a risk management asset, someone the company could trust not to explode, not to leak, not to demand. And that raises a quiet but unsettling thought. When a person is rewarded for never resisting, never breaking pattern, never choosing themselves, what happens when they finally need to? Because the habits built here did not disappear when the music stopped. They followed her into every decision that came next. At its peak, F of X was not failing, it was drifting, critically praised, internationally visible, and creatively ahead of its time. The group occupied a strange position inside SM Entertainment. It was profitable enough to justify continued existence, but not profitable enough to be prioritized. Promotions came inconsistently. Long gaps passed without explanation. Albums appeared, then vanished from strategy. For the public, this looked like mismanagement. For those inside the system, it signaled something more final. FX was no longer a long-term investment. As the group's leader, Victoria was expected to hold the line, not publicly, that was never allowed, but internally. Keep morale stable. Keep questions quiet. Keep schedules moving. Yet leadership did not grant her access to decisions. It granted her proximity to their consequences. When individual members began facing personal crises, injuries, and public scrutiny, the silence from the company grew heavier. There was no official pause, no farewell, no explanation, just absence. This was the moment many later framed as betrayal. Victoria began spending more time in China. Solo schedules increased. Korean promotions slowed. Online narratives hardened quickly. She was abandoning the group, prioritizing personal gain, choosing safety over loyalty. What those narratives ignored was the structure of choice itself. In K-pop, staying is only possible if the system allows it. And by this stage, the system had already moved on. Foreign idols do not exit groups the way domestic idols do. They do not receive closure arcs. They do not negotiate legacy. When momentum fades, the decision is often unspoken, but irreversible. Victoria did not announce her departure from FX. She simply stepped into the only space still open to her. China offered opportunity, but more importantly, agency. The ability to work without asking permission across borders. The ability to exist without waiting for a phone call that never came. From a criminal tracks perspective, this was not a dramatic collapse. It was a controlled withdrawal, no lawsuits, no explosive interviews, no public confrontation. And that restraint is precisely what makes this moment revealing. In an industry where conflict often creates leverage, Victoria chose invisibility over resistance. Was it loyalty to the group that kept her silent? Or awareness that speaking would destroy what little protection remained? The line between principle and calculation is thin when contracts, visas, and careers intersect. And in that space, silence becomes a strategy rather than a weakness. The disbandment of FX was never officially declared until years later. By then, the damage, emotional and professional, had already settled. For Victoria, the narrative hardened into something paradoxical. She was both the one who left and the one who survived. Criticized for moving on, yet envied for landing on her feet. But survival inside entertainment systems is rarely neutral. It comes with a cost that isn't visible in headlines. By leaving quietly, she preserved her career. By refusing to confront the machine, she preserved her image. What she did not preserve was the right to explain herself, and that trade-off would define everything that followed. Because once an artist proves they will exit without noise, every future role comes with the same unspoken expectation. Stay useful, stay quiet, and never make the system regret letting you go. Returning to China did not mean returning to control. It meant entering a different system with its own invisible boundaries. In the Chinese entertainment industry, foreign-trained idols are not greeted as veterans. They are tested as outsiders. For Victoria Song, the label followed her immediately. Idol turned actress. Not a compliment, a warning. It suggested limited depth, manufactured emotion, and a shelf life tied to youth rather than craft. Her early acting projects reflected that pressure. Roles were chosen carefully. Strong women, independent professionals, characters designed to signal seriousness without provoking controversy. Every casting decision looked strategic because it was. In an industry where one failed role can define an artist for years, risk becomes something to be managed, not embraced. And Victoria managed it meticulously. Too meticulously, some critics would later argue. Unlike many contemporaries, she avoided public romance narratives. No dramatic breakups, no viral confessions, no emotional oversharing. This absence was not accidental. In Chinese celebrity culture, personal stories are often weaponized, amplified when useful, discarded when inconvenient. Victoria's team built a profile that minimized exposure. The public saw success, but rarely saw her. Interviews stayed professional. Answers stayed controlled. Boundaries stayed intact. From the outside, this looked like stability. From inside the system, it was something else. Constant self-editing. Every appearance required calibration, not too distant, not too familiar, not too ambitious, not too passive. The margin for error was narrow, and she stayed within it. That discipline earned her consistent work, brand partnerships, and a reputation as someone safe to collaborate with. But safety, in this context, is not praise. It is classification. The paradox became clear over time. As her resume grew, emotional connection with the audience did not deepen in the same way. Viewers respected her, but rarely felt invited inside her world. Critics described her performances as controlled, sometimes restrained. That restraint was interpreted as lack, not of talent, but of vulnerability. And vulnerability in modern celebrity culture is currency. This is where the quiet scandal emerges. Not in behavior, but in absence. An artist whose life generates no chaos becomes difficult to mythologize. There is nothing to forgive, nothing to redeem, nothing to debate. And in an attention economy driven by emotional extremes, neutrality can be invisible. Criminal Tracks does not frame this as failure. It frames it as consequence. When a person spends years learning how not to disrupt systems, that skill does not vanish when freedom technically arrives. Habits remain, silence becomes reflex, control becomes identity, and that leads to an uncomfortable realization. If an artist avoids every trap laid by the industry, but in doing so, avoids revealing who they truly are, what exactly is the audience connecting to? Because at some point, the absence of scandal stops looking like discipline and starts looking like distance. By the time Victoria Song was firmly established in the Chinese market, her image had solidified into something unusually rigid. She was described as professional, composed, disciplined. Words that sound flattering until they begin to repeat too often. In an industry fueled by volatility, her consistency stood out. But consistency, when taken too far, becomes expectation. And expectation quickly turns into confinement. The label of being scandal-free followed her everywhere. Media outlets praised her as a model celebrity. Brands trusted her. Producers viewed her as low risk. Yet this reputation carried an unspoken condition. She could not afford to change. Any deviation would not be judged as evolution, but as betrayal of the image that protected her. The higher the pedestal, the narrower the space to move. This is the rarely discussed side of celebrity safety. Once an artist is classified as reliable, the system begins to depend on that reliability. She was not invited to disrupt narratives, only to reinforce them. Scripts offered to her often mirrored her public persona. Competent women, emotionally restrained, morally unambiguous. Range existed, but boundaries remained. Exploration became secondary to reassurance. At the same time, public perception began to shift. Some audiences praised her strength. Others questioned her warmth. Online commentary described her as distant, untouchable, even cold. These were not accusations of wrongdoing, but of emotional absence. In celebrity culture, absence can be more damaging than controversy. Scandal fades, distance lingers. From a criminal track's perspective, this moment reveals how reputation functions as a control mechanism, not imposed by force, but by reward. As long as Victoria stayed within expectations, opportunities flowed. But those opportunities were conditional. The system did not need to silence her. She had already learned how to self-regulate. This raises an unsettling question. When a person is praised for being flawless, do they still have permission to be human? Mistakes, in her case, were not seen as growth opportunities. They were perceived as risk, and risk was something her entire career had been designed to eliminate. The irony is that audiences often claim to want authenticity, but the industry rewards predictability. Victoria became proof of that contradiction. She did everything right, and in doing so, gradually removed unpredictability from her public existence. What remained was an image so polished that it resisted emotional access. Here, the scandal is structural, not personal. A system that values control over complexity produces artists who are safe but distant, respected but rarely understood. Victoria did not lose her career. She did not collapse. She did not disappear. She remained, but within a narrowing frame, and that leads to a final, unresolved tension. When an artist becomes too safe to question, too controlled to surprise, does stability become another form of invisibility? Measured by industry standards, Victoria's song succeeded. Her career did not implode. She was never publicly erased. She avoided the fate that claimed so many of her contemporaries: lawsuits, scandals, sudden disappearances, or forced apologies. From the outside, her path looks enviable. Stable projects, endorsements, longevity, control. But stability is not the same as freedom, and survival is not the same as victory. What Victoria's trajectory reveals is a quieter truth about modern celebrity systems. They do not only punish rebellion, they also reward compliance, and the reward comes with strings attached. Over time, those strings tighten. By choosing silence at critical moments, she preserved her future. By avoiding confrontation, she protected her image. By staying within safe roles, she maintained relevance. Each decision made sense in isolation. Together, they formed a pattern that limited the space she could occupy as a person. Not censored, but filtered. Not silenced, but shaped. This is not a story about regret. There is no public evidence that Victoria resents her choices. What exists instead is something more complex: the visibility of restraint. A life carefully edited in real time, where authenticity is managed, not expressed. Where privacy is preserved, but at the cost of emotional connection. Criminal Tracks does not ask whether she should have chosen differently. It asks whether the system ever allowed a different outcome. When careers depend on remaining useful, likable, and predictable, deviation becomes expensive. And for artists trained from the beginning to absorb pressure quietly, deviation can feel reckless rather than liberating. There is also an unspoken consequence to this kind of survival. Without a public collapse, there is no redemption arc. Without scandal, there is no forgiveness narrative. The audience never gets closure, only continuation. A steady presence that never explodes, never resolves, and never fully reveals itself. And perhaps that is the final cost. Not the loss of fame, but the loss of myth. In entertainment, stories are built on extremes: rise and fall, triumph and failure. Victoria exists outside those arcs. She remains suspended between success and distance, admired but rarely debated. Which brings us back to a question that has followed her entire career. If the goal was to endure, she achieved it. But if the goal was to be understood, the outcome is less clear. Because when a person spends their life avoiding scandal, what the world remembers may not be who they were, but how carefully they learned to stay intact. Victoria's song was never a cautionary tale. She was never a headline waiting to explode. And that may be the most revealing part of her story. In industries built on excess, collapse, and spectacle, she chose, or was trained, to move in the opposite direction, quietly, carefully, without noise. There is no moment in her career that can be labeled a downfall, no single decision that destroyed her path. What exists instead is a long sequence of rational choices, each designed to reduce risk. Choices that preserve stability, protected reputation, and ensured continuity. And yet, taken together, they form a question rather than a conclusion. Criminal Tracks does not ask whether she was right or wrong. It asks something more uncomfortable. When a system rewards silence more than truth, consistency more than growth, obedience more than individuality, what kind of success does it produce? And at what personal cost? Victoria survived K-pop without rebellion. She navigated C entertainment without scandal. She avoided every visible trap placed in her path. But survival, as this story suggests, is not neutral. It shapes identity. It narrows expression. It teaches people not only how to succeed, but how to stay contained. So the final question is not about her. It's about the position she represents. If you were placed inside a system that promised security only if you never crossed invisible lines, how would you handle it? Would you protect your future at the expense of being fully seen? Or would you risk everything for a chance at freedom, knowing the system might not forgive you? Victoria Song's story offers no answers, only a mirror. And sometimes, the most unsettling stories are the ones where nothing appears to go wrong, yet something essential quietly disappears along the way.